Craig, you're doing the intro today, so
No, it's all you.
all me.
All you.
We said we were
Yeah,
gonna go every other week.
that's the tradition. You got it.
That's a tradition. Okay. Well,
Let's do it.
ladies and gentlemen out there in YouTube, welcome to Disc Golf Central Live. This is another Tuesday night live stream. This week, I've got myself, Tori. That is Craig. We're here for Disc Golf Central, and then we are joined by Cameron Benak. Is that how you pronounce that? I didn't even.
Yeah, Benak.
Benak.
Yep.
Cool. PDGA number 74365 at Cam Disc Golf on Instagram. And you have a YouTube page too, right?
I do. I haven't posted a whole bunch there. Last season, I tried getting a little bit more into it. I'd like to a bunch this season, but we'll see how it kind of goes.
Yeah.
And that's the same as well, just the Cam Disc Golf.
Cool. Yeah, we actually, you and I connected on Reddit, on the Disc Golf subreddit last week after the stream. So that was cool, just kind of happenstance, and we, you being from Traverse City and me formerly from Michigan, Craig still in Central Michigan, fire up chips. So that is just kind of a natural connection for all of us. So, Cam, you're on Team Prodigy. That is awesome. Tell us about this upcoming year for you and what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, you want to talk about tournaments or just overall general stuff? Or
do you have any
sure.
Specific goals for the tournament season this year?
Yeah, specific goals is to be that big, 1,000 rated. I think that's been a goal of mine for the past couple seasons. Just been working towards that. But this season, I just really want to focus on just playing more. Each year for about the past 4 years, I do between 15 to 18 tournaments, and this year I kind of really want to step it up a bit more, maybe hit like that 25 to 30 mark. Just kind of go a little bit more deep into it, and not just be a couple of months, do a whole lot. So also plan on going to a couple big of the Pro Tour events, hoping to hit up Idlewild and maybe MVP. I would like to make D-Glow, but I don't think I can get that Friday off of work, unfortunately. So
yeah, that's the Discraft Great Lakes Open.
Yeah, down in Midland.
Yeah. Oh, it's in Midland this year.
Technically, yeah, I think that's what it's technically at. But
area.
Yeah.
Cool. Interesting. Sweet.
Yeah. Nope, that's about it.
All right, cool. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to be on Team Prodigy. About how were you able to get on Team Prodigy? Did the process? A lot of people don't know what it's like to be a sponsored pro disc golfer and how that whole thing works. Were you discovered? Was there a conversation behind the scenes? I mean, you don't have to disclose anything that you can't or whatever, for whatever reasons. But just tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a sponsored, touring pro week to week during the season.
Yeah. So I started off my career, you'd say, with disc golf and tournament stuff by, I figured out what professional disc golf was by watching Will Schustrick back in the day. And he was kind of like my first professional that I ever really knew of. And at the time, that was when the Prodigy stuff was all happening. And he was, like that face of Prodigy.
Yeah.
So I picked up some of their discs. I really liked the plastic, and then the numbering and the letter system of how they, name their discs really made it easy for myself as a new player to kind of figure out what I should be throwing and what I should be doing and all that. And I just really liked the felt of it and everything, of the feel and of the plastic and all that. So started with that. Pretty much been throwing Prodigy for the past, 5 years, two of those years being on Team Prodigy specifically. I didn't really ever get discovered per se. I, sent a lot of messages on Facebook to some of the guys who manage the teams, some emails to Prodigy themselves. And of course, some promotion stuff on Instagram, tagging them, just kind of, get my name under their radar, stuff like that. Yeah,
for sure.
That's awesome. So I joined the street team at the beginning of last season, which is like their amateur team.
Yeah.
And then I got to meet some of the guys, Will Schustrick, Michael Gibney at Bowling Green AMs and AM Worlds this year. And then I got bumped up to the ambassador team for this upcoming season.
Awesome. So really, it sounds
Very cool.
It sounds like you just kind of took it upon yourself, you knew what you wanted to accomplish, and you just set out to achieve it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's cool for people to know that, sometimes just obviously you have to have the skills to back it up, but if you're just willing to work hard and get your name in front of the right people, good things can happen. That's sweet.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and Tori and I have talked about this a little bit. I think that's one of the cool things about disc golf is that, you're able to kind of attack that and make it what you want, like what you want it to be. And also there's guys out there and women that, as a disc golf community, we kind of have each other's back. And I'm sure that there were people along the way that kind of said, hey, check out my buddy Cameron, and, what do you think of him? And, or maybe you've done that for other people. And I think just talking to people that have been sponsored, it's been kind of a common theme that, somebody's either taken them under their wing or they've taken somebody under their wing and kind of paved the way a little bit. But also, you're taking it upon yourself to go after that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think people don't necessarily realize, and I'm not super into, the disc golf scene as much as, somebody who plays 18 or 20 tournaments a year like yourself. But it does seem like people don't have a full appreciation of just how small the disc golf community really is. And when you start doing that and you're playing those tournaments, that pretty consistent schedule, you start seeing a lot of the same people, you start building those relationships, and it really is kind of just an organic thing, it seems like to me. So that's something I'm excited about for this year is, moving to a new area down here in southeast Texas. There's not as many tournaments around here as I thought there would be. There's certainly not as many as there are in Michigan, which is kind of mind-blowing to me, but Michigan's kind of a disc golf haven with Discraft right there. But I'm just excited to get to know. There's a lot of clubs around here that do a lot of good work and have a lot of cool courses, and like Texas States is just right up the road a little bit at Spring Valley in Spring, which is about half an hour from me. So I'm gonna go and try and get my face out there for that. Not play, but just be there and create some content, meet some people. So yeah, it's cool that you just kind of did it on your own, just kind of a self-made, and now you're here and you can say, hey, I'm Team Prodigy, I'm a pro disc golfer. That's sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. So tell us about, Throwing Prodigy. You mentioned how their naming convention kind of works, and that was obviously brand new to the sport when they kind of burst onto the scene back in 2013. So did you kind of discover Prodigy and disc golf after the big explosion of Prodigy? Because I know as somebody who was kind of just starting to follow the program before that was really kind of the first big thing where all of a sudden that's what everybody was talking about. Kind of the same way with McBeth to Discraft this year. Like, everyone's talking about that. Prodigy just dominated all of the pro disc golf talk for, a full year almost, maybe even more, picking up all the top name pros and then boom, exploding onto the scene with their own discs and stuff. So did you kind of come to Prodigy because of that, or were you, interested before? Or what was kind of the timeline there?
I actually heard of Prodigy well after that. I didn't get into professional disc golf until 2000, or just tournament disc golf until 2015. I played for about 3 years before that, but I didn't know there was any sort of professional scene or anything along those lines. I think I was playing maybe once or twice a month back with AVR and Star Wraith or something. Yep. That a buddy gave me. Once I found out about professional disc golf and people are actually making a living and doing this kind of lifestyle, and I wanted to get into tournaments and leagues and all that stuff. Like I said earlier, Will was at the top back then. He was top 3, maybe even best in the world, and he really caught my eye. Just the way he threw the disc was just unbelievable to me. You know what I mean? Just watching him throw was just crazy. So
he's so smooth.
Yeah. So that would have been at the end of 2014, early 2015, and that's when I started picking up some of the discs. And I didn't actually really know about that whole shake-up until maybe the next year when I just heard, some guys at tournaments talking about it, and I never really knew about all that prior to any of it. So
interesting. Okay. So I mean, actually, kind of interestingly, it sounds like you and Craig would be kind of more in the same in terms of your knowledge of Prodigy. When by the time you joined the team, Craig, you were kind of into disc golf, early on 2015. It seems like that, that's almost kind of coinciding because because I was just getting into disc golf when the whole shakeup kind of happened and they snagged all those pros. And then me and some buddies introduced Craig a couple years later. So,
yeah, and now here we are 4 years later, and Cameron's a pro disc golfer, and I'm just some schmuck that can't do anything. So, I mean, you have a little bit of both worlds there.
We were talking today, though, Craig and I. I've thrown a handful of Prodigy discs, but Craig's owned, I think, one in your life.
I've only ever even held one Prodigy disc. Yeah, when I started, it was like Prodigy was like this foreign thing. No stores around us in Central Michigan really sold Prodigy. The plastic,
for sure.
Yeah, the plastic was like super premium. They cost more money than the cheap Innova or Discraft that I could go buy at the store. So it was always kind of like, I don't really see the point. I had a couple friends that threw Prodigy. They had mixed bags, and they seemed to like them, and I think actually that's how I got one. Is one of the guys gave me I think it was a D2. Is that what I told you it was?
Yep.
I don't even know, but it was a first run. It's cool, but at the time it was way too much disc for me, and I just never really used it. So that's kind of my knowledge of Prodigy. So I'm just kind of sitting back learning tonight.
Yeah. So, and for me, like, I've more of an experience with Prodigy. When the whole shakeup happened, they started putting out discs. One of the first ones that they even put out was the M3, and at the time, I think it was a proto M3, the one that I got. So they didn't even have like the different plastic names. Like, they just had the one run that I think is maybe like the 400 line now, that was like the original run, maybe 700.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But I bought that M3 because I'd been kind of cycling some DX rocks, and all of them were too flippy, and I wanted something that was going to be that straight to slightly overstable for my arm speed at the time. And the first time I threw that M3, I was like, dang, that one of the coolest discs like I've ever felt, I've ever seen. The profile of it was kind of unique compared to all the other discs that I had experience with. And I loved it from the start. So I immediately went out and bought an M1, and it was like a meat hook for me. And I was like, oh no, dang it, I can't throw this one. I'm not good enough to throw this big overstable mid range. And then I tried an F7, and I really liked the F7. And then a buddy gave me a D4 that was like just the prettiest, nicest feeling disc that I'd ever gotten. And he had it for a while, and it was too flippy. So that was kind of my experience in starting off in disc golf. I really started off with Discraft, and that's just kind of been my comfort zone ever since. But everything that I've ever touched from Prodigy, I've really liked. It just never connected with what I needed in my bag at the right time. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like, so I had something, and somebody put it in my hands, or I went out and I bought it. And aside from that M3, which was in the bag for quite a while, and then I lost it in a pond, aside from that, like, Prodigy was just not something that was ever in my bag. But I've appreciated so much about the way that what they did for the sport in 2013 set the entire pro game ahead, like leaps and bounds compared to kind of the trajectory it was on. And so I've always had a really positive opinion of Prodigy because of that. I've just never really experimented a lot with their plastic. So what do you love about Prodigy plastic, and why do you think, other than the fact that you said it, it really helps you build a bag as a beginner, which I think their naming convention lends itself to. What do you love about Prodigy plastic as a disc golfer who trying to get out there and earn some money on tour?
The reason I kind of fell in love with it was just the feel of the plastic. I really liked almost like a G-Star, but more stiff. That's not really the right word because it's not super stiff plastic. But just the feel of it in the hand, it feels like almost like when I grip it, I know exactly what's going to happen. Like, it doesn't feel like it's ever going to come out early. It never feels like I'm going to grip onto it for too long and have it come out super late. It just feels super consistent for me.
Yeah, it feels premium. I think that's the best word that I have for it. Is just feels premium compared to a lot of other plastics.
Right. Yeah.
I can honestly say it, and I've held discs from just about every manufacturer. Even some of the smaller time ones like Heiserbomb and stuff like that. Like, I've never felt a disc the way that a Prodigy disc especially that D4. The D4 was so like it was like it held on to my hand, not in a bad way, because you could think maybe that means it's like grip locking, but no matter how sweaty my hands were, no matter how cold out it was, it always felt nice. And to even see today that like other disc manufacturers haven't been able to kind of replicate that says a lot about who's doing good things behind the scenes to make sure that the product that Prodigy's putting out is top notch. So even the 200G plastic, the baseline plastic for Prodigy, I think is miles ahead of anybody else's baseline. Just the durability and the grip. I mean, compared to DX especially, and compared to Pro D, it's really awesome. And that's kind of what they pulled out and kind of sold people on at the start was, hey, this is going to be
that quality,
really quality plastic that you're going to be able to use for years and years and years.
So, Cameron, we asked you on Instagram, one of the questions that we asked you for being our disc golfer of the week was, what are some things that you're excited for? What's the thing that you're most excited for Prodigy this year? And you had said that the new releases for Prodigy this year, they just released a new disc today. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, it releases on Thursday. They put out the promo video today.
They announced it today, I should say. Yeah.
I actually have one over here. It's the new D1 Max. So it's our overstable distance driver, which is the D1. They're coming out with this new lineup, the Max lineup, which basically is taking, the old discs and adding a little bit more speed and a little bit more glide to the disc to really get it out and get the most, potential distance you can. Mm-hmm. Comparative to like the D1 versus D1 Max, I got a chance to throw it this weekend, even though it's pretty cold here still and we got a bunch of snow. But from what I could tell is it definitely is less stable as far as, high speed stability. It goes a lot farther, comes out of the hand a lot cleaner and a lot faster. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more or less deep in the rim. So maybe you have like smaller hands or smaller fingers and you want something that, it doesn't feel as deep and it doesn't feel like you're just going to hold on to it forever. Yeah. It really feels good for that. But it still has this nice overstable, like dumpy finish to it, like the original D1 had. Yeah. It's just going to give you more potential distance.
Yeah. Watching the hype video or the first looks video earlier today, it really looked like it just had that little. It was almost like it was a seasoned version of itself of the original D1.
Right.
It just had that little extra pop to flat, and then just a touch softer finish, but still look really reliable when they were doing side by side comparisons with the guys in the drone overhead. Honestly, I know of a place down the street where I can go pick up Prodigy, and so when it comes out, I might have to go grab myself one because
there we go.
There's a good spot for that in my bag right now. And I don't really have the arm speed to be touching much high speed stuff, but I basically only throw cranks right now, which are in the wind get really squirrely. So
sure.
But you did remind me though that I've also thrown the hybrid line from Prodigy, and that was something that I was like. When those came out, I was a little bit skeptical at first because I was like, is it a driver? Is it a fairway? Like, what is it? And then I got my hands on one, and I realized that it was something completely unique, something totally different than anything else that was out there. So I had the OG H2 before the V2 runs.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a spot in my bag that I talked about on last week's stream. Because I tend to get myself in trouble a lot, it's nice to have a skip shot in the bag where I can just put something on the ground and skip down the fairway. So that filled that spot in my bag for probably most of a season, 2015 maybe, whenever they came out. I bought one pretty much right away. And then when I picked up the Discraft Machete, they were kind of similar, and so I had my buddy wanted the H2 and wanted to try it, and I let him try it, and he's held on to that for me ever since. So, but that was a sweet disc.
I still I bag an original 750 H2. I actually bag two of them. Yeah. But those are the most thrown discs in my bag for sure. Sweet. You can just throw them as hard as you want, and I know it's probably not going past like 320.
Right.
So just nice clean hyzers.
Yeah. Cool.
For days where it's not, I'm not feeling like throwing something more controlled and I just need to rip on something, headwinds, whatever kind of wind, I'll know exactly, how far and where it's going to go.
Yeah. What would you say? I mean, and you said that's probably the most thrown disc golf or disc in your bag right now, what would you say is your favorite? If it's not those, if there's something else, if it is that, then that's fine. But if there's something else that you're like, man, this is my absolute favorite disc because it's got this one shot that no other disc has, or whatever the case might be, what would you say that is?
I got my bag right here. I'd probably say it's going to be my old 400 gray Proto M2.
Okay.
So this is that same line of the M3 that you're talking about. So the old Proto M3s are actually M2s when they switched to production run.
I do remember hearing that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Proto M3 came out a little bit more stable than what they initially wanted. So they renamed those to the M2s and came out with a new M3. But the M2 is my favorite disc in the bag. It's just a nice clean mid-range for me. I can throw it really hard. I know it's going to go nice and straight, maybe give a little finish on it depending on how beat up it is. If I put a little ante on it, it's going to hold for a little bit, but then still get a nice pan out at the end. It's never really going to, even into a headwind, it's not going to flip over and get too squirrely on me or anything like that.
Yeah. That's what like I said, when I was cycling through some rocks at the time, I appreciated that about it because I knew, as I was throwing all these DX rocks and a couple big tree hits and the new fresh one that kind of was that nice straight to slightly overstable finish,
Mm-hmm.
that shot was gonna stay true so much longer with that Proto M3, M2, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So I definitely had a home in the bag for quite a while. We have a friend that we refer to quite often. His name's Dan. Maybe he'll be on the stream with us sometime. But I know he throws an X1. Dan's got the biggest arm of anybody that we know personally. And he throws an X1. Do you bag an X1?
I do not. I've owned a few over the years. I ended up selling them all. I don't have like a crazy big arm. Like I can throw decently far for, my standards, but I don't crush by any means. I've never really needed something that crazy overstable. I do have a couple D2s in the bag that are nice and meaty, that are more overstable than a standard D2. But I've thrown them a few times and I've had buddies throw them, but not something that I've ever really needed.
Yeah, I can honestly say I don't think I've ever seen a driver that fast and go that far but still be that overstable.
Yeah.
The new OS maybe would be the only other one that I've actually ever seen someone throw with any amount of skill that was that fast and overstable. So cool. I feel like there was one more thing that we wanted to talk about. Craig, do you recall? We did a little bit.
I did. Yeah, I was just going to ask him, what do you got coming up as far as tournaments? I mean, we're hopefully getting into spring here in Michigan. So what do you got on the tournament slate coming up?
Sure. First tournament that I'm looking at doing is going to be it's the weekend of March 3rd. I think second is the Saturday, third is the Sunday. Down in Kalamazoo. I think it's the Lumberjack Open.
Okay.
I'm looking at doing that. Depending on weather, we'll see if it turns out to be super nasty. I'll probably not.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
It's not looking good right now.
Yeah. Right. No kidding.
But, yeah, it's not looking good, but.
So that's the first plan. Next is the following weekend in Lansing. That's the Sleepy Hollow tournament that we mentioned before the show. Looking at doing that one, and then there's one in Grand Rapids at the end of March, and then once April hits, it's going to be kind of go time. Especially for me, there's a lot of 2 tournaments a weekend. I'm hitting up as many or possibly even all the B tiers in Michigan this year.
Sweet.
With it being my rookie season. I'll qualify for like rookie of the year and all that stuff. So I'm going to try and hit up, all the bigger tournaments and just kind of see what happens.
Sweet.
So your goal for the year is to be 1,000 rated. Sounds like you're going to play a ton of tournaments. Getting a bunch of B tiers in is obviously going to help, get that rating up. So what, if you could say, it's November 2019, you want to be able to look back and say this was a successful year. What's that going to take aside from the the ratings goal? What's it going to take for you to be able to look back and say, man, this was a good year, and I'm looking good going into my sophomore year, so to speak, next year.
Yeah, I'd say just being more consistent. I've years in the past I've had really good tournaments, and then I've had some really bad tournaments.
Sure.
And so it kind of cancels each other out to just be, pretty mediocre across the board for at least my standards. So this year I'd really like to have, still have those really good tournaments, and then maybe have those tournaments where it's not quite there, not be as bad as they have been in the past. Still have them be, solid rounds that I can just feel good about.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, you mentioned on our post on our Instagram that the biggest thing you were working on this year was mental game, and I think that's probably a big part of that is just being able to stay solid when you have maybe one or two bad shots, not let it turn into one or two bad holes and then a bad round or whatever it might
Exactly.
be. So,
yep.
Cool. Well, Cam, I appreciate you coming on the show. I know I feel like I've done a lot of talking. Craig's done a lot of listening because
I don't have much to say about Prodigy, but I'm excited to hear about it. I think that video today that they released, I mean, that as a Discraft guy, that got me fired up. So I'm hoping that it drives some sales, and hopefully they have a good year, because if one company is dominating the sport, it's not very good. But if there's multiple companies that are competing and getting big name players and disc sales are through the roof, I think that's great for the sport. So I wish nothing but the best for Prodigy, for you, for the tournament season. I'm sure we'll see you around in Michigan at some tournament at some point this summer.
For sure.
Yeah. I did. You just reminded me of something that I wanted to make a point of, because Craig, we've talked a long time in the past about how for a while, like early in the early 2000s, some of the bigger disc companies kind of jumped on YouTube and new media and social media, and then it kind of just fell off. And when Prodigy came on, it seemed like they really prioritized that younger demographic, getting the young guys out, the kind of the future of the game, having that foresight to say, okay, where's the game going? And they put a lot of effort into high production quality on videos and stuff that is really dynamic looking and comes out and makes an impression, as it has on Craig and I today, just watching the D1 Max kind of first look. And then not only that, but it seems like, especially with those two young guys in that video, Prodigy really tries to focus on those young up-and-comers and giving them a leg up and giving them something that can legitimize them at an early age. And I just think that's awesome for the sport. I think that's going to do so much for the future of professional disc golf for years to come. And I think Prodigy's positioning himself right at where that's gonna take off. So
right.
Cool. Well, Cam, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to continue after a little break here and go on to another segment, but we definitely appreciate you having you on, and we'll definitely catch you out there around some tournaments in Michigan this year.
Yeah, we'd like to have you on again at some point too, just to check in, this summer and how things are going, how tournaments are going, and so we'll touch base.
Sure, that sounds awesome.
Yeah,
thanks, guys.
We'll circle back around and definitely be back in touch again at some point. So again, thanks for joining us, and take it easy. Have a great night.
Hey, thank you. You too.
See ya. Cool.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Prodigy.
I mean, really, what we were talking about, like, it's nothing against Prodigy. Nothing I've ever touched or had from Prodigy has been anything like you said. It's all premium stuff. Like, it's their discs feel like no other discs that I've ever touched. It's always been.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing. I mean, where I'm at, where we were at, there's just nothing. Like, I don't even know of any stores around here that sell Prodigy, even to this day. Maybe a couple, but
there was
definitely
a store in Lansing that Dan and I took like a day trip to at one point, like some random day, and he bought like 3 or 4 Prodigy discs. It was the first time we'd been able to get our hands on them.
Right. But back then, I mean, if I had $20 on me, I'm going to MC Sports and I'm buying something from Innova or something from Discraft. So it just was that's really why I never got into Prodigy. And like I said, they were like $3 or $4 more for a disc than Innova or Discraft. And so that was something that kind of pushed me away at the beginning, but nothing against them. I think that they put out good product. I think they've got some good pros on their team. I'm a big Kevin Jones fan, and Trina Allen. So so I think they've got some cool stuff, and excited. Like I said, that video got me pumped up, and hopefully it's a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if it wasn't for the McBeth shakeup, the Kevin Jones, that would have been the highlight of the off season, I think, probably, because so many people are just banking on him being like the up and coming guy in the next year to
Sure.
really make a splash, and I think he'll live up to
Sure.
it.
I mean, yeah, there's definitely some big moves. I don't know that would have been the one, but it
Yeah,
definitely
I
would have
guess,
been.
yeah,
It would have been
Ricky to back to Innova.
Ricky, Paul Ulibarri. I mean, there's a whole list, but Kevin Jones also is a top guy, and he's a top up and comer. So yeah, that is a big. I don't know. It all depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Jones is a young dude, and
Yeah.
I think, I mean, just like we just said, I think that falls in line really well with what Prodigy has kind of set out to do. At least it seems like it. I mean, the whole
He's
big
the Prodigy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
That's
is
really
their
what it comes
namesake.
down to. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think they've done a good job kind of figuring that part of themselves as like an organization out since the whole shakeup, because they got literally, with the exception of Paul McBeth, I think they got and Nate Doss. Those were kind of the two, like those were the guys standing in their own corners that were never going to leave. Everybody else went to Prodigy. I mean, literally, Nico LaCastro, Yuli, Big Germ, Ricky, Kayla Viska. I'm trying to think of even who some of the other big names were, but then girls too. They got Paige Pierce, they got Sarah Hokum, they got Katrina Allen. It was just like, all of a sudden they were all playing for this company that no one had even seen a disc from yet. Like they hadn't even put discs out yet, and it was just crazy. It was just absolutely crazy. But
yeah.
So do we want to kind of transition to talking about the upcoming season?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, what do you want to talk about?
Just the tournaments, the recap of the tournament that just happened in California, and maybe heading into the Las Vegas Challenge.
Yeah, watching. I'll say this: the coverage from Central Coast was awesome. I'm so glad that they have it. I wish that it wasn't on a day delay because. Yeah. You know, seeing online and checking PDGA and seeing scores ahead of time, it kind of ruined it a little bit for me when I would watch it the next day. But it still was cool. It was cool to watch. It was interesting to see. You know, obviously the big story was Paul with Discraft for the first time, and it for me as a Discraft guy, it gave me a whole new appreciation for Paul McBeth and for professional disc golfers, because before, when Paul would throw, say, a destroyer and it would flip up and turn, and you know, it would just be a beautiful shot and people would go crazy about it, it was kind of like, okay. But now seeing him, you know, throw a forehand zone and be able to turn it, and you know, throwing forces and turning those, and knowing how far away I am from being able to do that, it was like, okay, wow, this is, I don't know, it just kind of opened my eyes to a whole new level of appreciation for the professionals that make it look so easy.
Right. Yeah. And seeing him kind of have to rely on those shots that you could just tell that he had comfortability with, that he was like, you know, he could throw that forehand zone shot all day. And then to kind of see him tinker with some of the other stuff, like going from throwing a forehand tracker on some holes to going back and having it be, you know, the force. But and then the drone, him pulling out the drone for really long overstable backhand shots, you know, as opposed to a Buzz OS or a, you know, Hornet, which is out of production obviously, but like he could get his hands on one if he wanted to.
Right.
You know, it was interesting to see somebody who, as someone who's thrown Discraft for so long, watch to see what the best player in the world arguably is going to do with the Discraft lineup. And for the most part, I think it was predictable. I was surprised to not see him. The other two guys on the lead card that were Discraft guys throwing the Raptor so much. I was surprised to not see him throwing the Raptor. But it sounds like he's going to have his own overstable distance driver, the Kong, coming out here pretty soon.
Yeah, I think it was maybe round 3. Eagle was talking about Paul telling him in a practice round that he's not really a fan of the Raptor, and so that's probably why they came out with the Kong, or are coming out with the Kong. Yeah. I don't know. That's kind of still hush hush, but he released the picture of it. What was that? Yesterday, maybe 2 days ago.
Something like that.
said, look for this in Las Vegas or whatever it said. But I don't know. It's interesting. They also said in round 3, I think it was Eagle made mention of it, how Paul used to throw a destroyer for 350-foot forehand shots, and now he's throwing a zone for those same shots. And to me, that's like, holy crap!
Yeah.
Like, it's just kind of eye opening to see that.
Yeah, it definitely puts into perspective just how much. It's just like we've talked about this before. It's just like when you watch somebody who's a really good ball golfer and you have played ball golf more than once in your life and you realize how hard it is. Then you watch these guys go and throw shots that are just unimaginable. I mean, I couldn't even believe watching the tournament coverage, and I'm sure like the normal layout for that course is not as insane as the layout they played, but just some of the tunnels that they had to navigate, some of the low ceilings with the picnic tables underneath the trees, and they had to hit this it's like a 4 or 5 foot gap between picnic table and low hanging branch, and they got to hit that and then still carry another 300 feet after that,
and not smoke one of the giant boulders that's on every single hole. And like, that's what I was thinking the whole time. Like, they would strategically plan skip shots to hit in a certain spot and skip over those giant boulders.
Yep.
And it's like, if I threw that, it would just smack right into the base of that rock. So yeah, it was interesting to watch.
It was fun to watch. I mean, and what's interesting to me, I think we're already seeing the move on Discraft's part pay some dividends, because they knew that round, they sponsored the coverage with Central Coast. They knew that round would have insane amounts of eyeballs on it because it was the first time that he was playing a sanctioned event and had their bags in it, and they capitalized. And I think that was awesome. But maybe next week we'll go into, well, is this weekend's the Las Vegas Challenge, right? This weekend is
2 days from now. They tee off.
It's Thursday tees. I always forget that.
I'm excited for Paul's card that tourney, the first round. They've got him and Eagle and Wysocki and Philo, which should be a pretty fun group to watch. I feel like Philo is a guy that flies under the radar, but he obviously had the one shot that everybody knows him from, but he's a great disc golfer and kind of flies under the radar. Yeah, that's what I mean. I think it'll be a cool round to watch because he seems like a cool guy.
Yeah, and the Jomez female Pro Open feature card is pretty stacked too.
Yeah.
So that'll be sweet. Well, I think that's a good place to leave this stream this week. We had some technical difficulties getting started on time, so it's probably not as long of a stream as the last one, but
still 15 minutes later than when we're usually done. So probably time to end her.
We will catch you all next week, and we'll probably talk about the Las Vegas Challenge. Maybe we'll have another disc golf for the week on, hopefully. And it's always awesome to just have guys, especially when it's a topic or a company that we don't know as much about, and we're pretty shameless about the fact that we're both.
We need to maybe next week we'll get Dan on. We need to get Dan on one of these times so that we don't have to refer to him as our friend Dan. Yeah. We need to come up with like a nickname for Dan, because we mention him about 20 times every podcast. You could make a drinking game out of it, and you could get pretty liquored up if you were.
It's Fairway Dan. I mean,
Fairway Dan.
It's already that's already his nickname.
It is not given by us, but yeah.
We gotta get Fairway Dan on the show.
We'll get him on.
Cool. So. Let's touch base with him and see if he wants to get on the stream next week.
Rock on.
Introduce all the people to Fairway Dan. Cool. All right, man. Well, you folks on YouTube, thanks for joining us. We will sign off till next week. Go follow us at DGCentral _ if you want to get in touch with us, DGCentralPodcast@gmail.com, and we will catch you next week.
See ya.